Let's talk about devTools. So, what is that? devTools is one of the most important aspects of coding. Yeah? devTools is a utility that comes built in with any modern browser today. So the first thing we're going to see today is how to enable devTools. Yeah? What you can see on the screen is one of the versions of Codeflix that was implemented in the past. You get a list of TV shows, and then you can click on them, and it goes to the details page. You can play the trailer. You have a menu, just a basic app. Yeah, but should be okay to start experimenting with the amazing world of devTools. So first of all, let's invest a couple of minutes with the setup of devTools. How do we open devTools? There are some shortcuts, but I always find easier just to open devTools doing right-click. So if you do right-click anywhere on the screen, anywhere, you'll find an inspect button. Yeah, this is probably not the most academic way to open devTools, but to me it's very pragmatic because it's very easy. Yeah? So once you open devTools, if it's the very first time you do that, it will open at the bottom, which to me, unless you have a weird portrait screen, is not the best way to deal with it. It is very personal. I personally prefer to have devTools open on the right-hand side. With modern versions of Chrome, and I know that Gray, for instance, likes that, you can open devTools on the left-hand side. Up to you, yeah? Find your preferred setup. Anyway, I particularly find that the vertical approach is better because the majority of the content is vertical. So it just helps. It just helps to read it. We will see across future workshops how to lay out everything, the combination of the resulting application, devTools, and even Visual Studio Code all together. If you've been attending any of the Introduction to React series on Meetup, you'll know that. So, what do we got in devTools? devTools is a huge world. You can do so many things. You can work as a devTools developer pretty much, because you can do even things like profiling, performance audit. It's immense. There are so many things you can do, and this is great because it keeps evolving, I also have some concerns about devTools, especially Chrome devTools, because some of the aspects are not working as expected. But anyway, we'll talk about that in the future. For now, starting from the basics, you may have noticed that there are several tabs, not necessarily displayed in my order. Let me zoom it a bit. Yeah, you see, we got, generally speaking, as a first tab, elements. Then you may have sources or other, but console maybe. You can rearrange them. If you drag and drop, you see, it's pretty cool. So the way I've sorted them is according to my preferences, right? Because these are the ones that I use the most. So let's have a look to the first one, elements. So with elements, we can play a bit with the structure of the current web application. If you hover across the DOM tree, you will see a blue color on the left telling us which element is highlighted. You see? I can highlight individual TV shows, no problem at all. And because I can highlight them, I can play with them. For instance, I can delete. What happens if I don't like the last season of Black Mirror? I can delete it. Gone. Yeah? You delete the element. Don't forget that whatever we do with devTools is not persisting at all. That means as soon as I refresh the browser, the application will be back to its original state. So it's good for prototyping, for testing. And once you are happy with the result, you have to go back to Visual Studio and persist the changes. So what else can we do? Apart from inspecting the DOM, inspecting the different elements of the user interface, you can change the styling. That's one of the most important aspects of devTools. If you notice, somewhere could be at the bottom of the DOM tree, or could be on the right hand side depending on your resolution, but you will see another panel that talks about the styles. Why this is good? Because this is CSS. Yeah, some of these things may sound familiar to you already. All the CSS that apply to any specific element. So for instance, can I add a border to all the elements? Maybe. Let's try to add a border. So let me see what we got here. So you see, anywhere I can change CSS properties. Look, you see, I can enable or disable them, and that's good because the application reacts immediately. So again, this is very convenient for testing purposes. So let's try to add a border to all my TV shows. Border 10 pixels solid red. Yeah. And then of course I can enable or disable it immediately. So it's really good for testing again. Yeah. So what else can we do here? Can we add a specific style on an individual element? Because now the border applies to all the TV shows. Yeah. What happens if I want to apply the border just on Black Mirror? How can we do that? Well, if you notice, the very first CSS rule says element.style. That means whatever we put in here will affect only the selected item. Yeah, the blue one. So if I want this border to be green, yeah, you see that now the border only applies to the first element. Can I hide a TV show? Do you know how to hide elements with CSS? What? Display what? Hidden. Display hidden. No, not hidden. Which CSS property applies to the value hidden?
Overflow.
Overflow is one of them. Tell me another one. So Vivian was pointing to the right direction. Hidden works with visibility. Have you ever heard about visibility? Oh, yeah. It's interesting because when you said that, everyone is, oh, half of them have no idea what I'm talking about. But just to feel part of the group, oh, yeah. Display none, correct. You can do visibility hidden or display none. So you know what's the difference between visibility hidden and display none?
I think it will load in the page and the hidden one will be there, but not this one.
That's correct, that's correct. This is a bit beyond the scope of this session. Yeah? It's to have a general catch-up about CSS. So with display none, the element is gone. You see, it doesn't exist anymore, visually speaking. You cannot see Black Mirror, right? However, if I change display none with visibility hidden, oh, look, it's not visible, but it's still there. Yeah, it's just invisible, but the space is still there. You see? That's the difference between visibility, hidden, and display none. Anyway, you can play with CSS. And you can even do some very nice things like, and we'll do a workshop about that, dealing with animation. So for instance, you got the menu, right? So imagine that we have a very fast animation and it's not behaving as expecting. With devTools, we can slow it down. You see, somewhere you have an animation panel, which by default runs at 100%, but look at what happens if I change the speed to 10%. Look, it's very sensual, right? The way now the menu shows in and out. Yeah, we can even change the animation type. There are multiple types of animation, linear, is, you know, lots of things that go a bit beyond the scope of the session. Just let you know that devTools, with devTools you can do all these things easily. So that's the elements panel. Before going to sources, that will be the most important one in the bootcamp, I would like to have a quick look to network. So the network tab will be absolutely vital starting from task number 18. So in the network tab, we can inspect, we can sniff the network traffic between our front end and the backend. You don't have any backend yet, but you will start introducing a backend starting from task number 18. So I can tell you how this works. At the moment, I have a user interface. This is a server hosted in London, remotely, in the cloud. When I refresh the page, the front end is asking my backend, which is also somewhere else in London, please give me the list of TV shows. And the backend is asking a database, which is in Ireland, give me the list of database. So of shows. So the database sends the data to the backend, and the backend sends the data to the front end. That's the way proper software works, with these three levels, yeah, on the stack. So I can see the interaction between the front end and the backend. You will see, especially once you start dealing with front end and backend, that on the very first attempt, things don't work as you expect, right? That only happens in Hollywood movies. Because it doesn't work, you need to figure out what's going on. And to figure out, what you can do is, with devTools, you can evaluate, you see, the traffic. So I can see that I'm invoking the backend from the front end, and as part of that request, yeah, the backend returns, look, in my case, returns a list of how many elements? 6. Is an array of 6 elements. So I can see the details that the backend is providing based on the information provided by our database in Dublin. So we'll be talking a lot about the network tab. Any questions so far? No? Right, so now let's spend the next 17.5 minutes talking about the most important aspect of devTools. Sources. Yeah, sources is very important because mainly 2 reasons. First of all, because it helps us to debug existing applications. So, in other words, as part of sources, I can open the same files that you are dealing with in Visual Studio. Yeah, with Visual Studio, at least yesterday, you've been working with a file called app.js, right? That's the entry file of your application. So I can do the same thing. I can open app.js and I can see what's going on. Yeah? Because I created several components, you will start creating components on task number 7. I created a component called gallery. So as part of the gallery, you can see that I'm already integrating my front end with my back end. And I can do something very sexy, which is I can add breakpoints. Do you know what the breakpoint is? What's a breakpoint? Correct. At the moment, when you refresh, the JavaScript runs end-to-end, boom, in one go, right? But we can change that. You can click in one line, yeah? This is like a control on the police, right? Drag control, right? So the execution will stop on line number 20. So if I refresh the page, look, boom, you see? The page is not rendered because I told it, please stop on line number 20. Why do I want to stop on line number 20? For instance, to evaluate the variables of my web page. For instance, I'm expecting to have an array of TV shows. At the moment, I have nothing. But now my application will go to the backend and will fetch a list of 6 TV shows. So if I resume the script, if I continue evaluating it, look at the loading bar, you see? Now it's back to line number 20. Hopefully, if I hover over line number 22, it will tell me, yes, you have 60 VSOs. Let's have a look. Here you go, you see? And then I can evaluate if that's what I'm expecting or not. So that's the main aspect of sources. You can debug your application. You'll have to do that very often because sometimes things don't work as you expect. Yeah. Even though I didn't explicitly mention that, the console, which is something in the, you can open a console tab. I'm sure you've seen that already. There is something called console, which is like a full screen console. However, you can also put the console on top of everything else. So there is an option, if I close it, let me open it from scratch. There is an option called Show Console Drawer, right? I like that setup because if there is any error in my application, it will be reported in the console, right? So this is very useful. So back to sources. First, usage, debugging. Second, usage, creating snippets. That's vital. If you are one of our 3 million subscribers on YouTube, no, we have like 100. If you've seen any of our YouTube videos, you've watched them, you may have noticed that we use devTools a lot. So how do we deal with devTools? That's the easiest way to create JavaScript content that you don't want to run, you don't want any UI, you just want to create a JavaScript function. Yesterday, some of you showed me how to do that with Visual Studio, which is fine. However, this is even simpler. You got the board challenge. So the board challenge on the first week will be a good opportunity to play with it using what I'm going to show now. So how do we play with the board challenge using sources? I'll show you. It's maybe a bit slightly hidden, slightly hard to find, but it's actually quite easy once you know what it is. So you'll get something, I think if it's the first time you run this, you'll get something like that, sort of. Right? You get a navigation panel with a few things on it. You may notice that there is a tiny arrow on the top left panel. If you click on it, you'll find something called snippets somewhere. Yeah? You click on the snippets, you'll get probably an empty list because if it's the first time, you got no snippet just yet. But you can create a new snippet. Yeah? If you create a new snippet, you bring a meaningful name because as you can see, eventually you may have hundreds of snippets. So I'll call it Intro to devTools, but just feel free to rename it to whatever you find convenient. And once I create it, I can close the navigator panel because it's a waste of space. And by the way, if you really want to play with devTools, at the moment you see I don't want to have the Breaking Bad guy on the left hand side. This is a bit useless. So you can run the console in full screen. To do that, click on the three dots. You remember at the beginning we talked about layout, right, bottom or left. There is also a floating option which is very sexy. If you click on it, you have full power, yes? So now all the screen goes to devTools, to the snippet. So in here now we can start dealing with JavaScript. We can start creating functions. You should bear in mind just one subtle but important thing, and it goes beyond the scope of this session to understand why we are going to do this. Towards the end of the bootcamp, when we start talking about advanced topics like context, scoping, and all these sort of things, we'll explain why we did that on the second day of the course. But for now, please remember, every time you create a snippet, please remember to surround it with curly braces. As simple as that. Just put curly braces surrounding everything, literally everything. One curly brace on top, one curly brace at the bottom. And once you do that, that's it. You can start dealing with JavaScript. So let's create a function. Let's call it welcome. Yeah, if you've done a bit of training, that should sound familiar to you. So that welcome function can return a message. Welcome to JavaScript. Yeah? Semicolon, yes or no?
Yes.
Yes, cool. And now this is the function definition, but now I have to invoke it. Yeah? So somewhere else I need to do that. So first of all, I declare the function, it's not executed yet, and then afterwards I invoke it. Note the parentheses. When you put the parentheses, means execute that function. So now, how do we evaluate the result of invoking welcome? You may have noticed already there is a play button that sounds promising, right? If you click on it, yeah, if you click on it, eventually that will work. This is one of the reasons why at some point I start hating this tool, because sometimes it doesn't work as expected. If that ever happens, we need to kill the tab and open it again. It sometimes happens, and this is pretty inconvenient, but this is what it is. So this is a good thing. You remember yesterday I told you that I don't want everything to work perfectly, because otherwise you don't learn how to debug issues. So here we have a problem. I will expect that to display a message at the bottom, but it's not displaying anything. And if I add a breakpoint, it's just ignoring me, right? It's doing nothing. So to deal with the problem, I will, first of all, I save it. So I will close that devTools. I will open an incognito tab. You know incognito, right? In Google Chrome. So when you open incognito, yeah, it should be working for you perfectly. Yeah, it's random. It's not working for you. No?
There is a message also, network quality value.
Okay, fair enough. So if you experience issues with devTools, to me, the first thing I will do is I will open an incognito window to avoid problems with extensions and things like that.
No, because you have to console log that, because it's returning a string, no? You don't have to console log that.
No. And the way to prove that is I added a breakpoint and it never hit the breakpoint. So it's not my fault. If it was my fault, the breakpoint should stop on the breakpoint. Yeah. So I will start again using an incognito window. Yeah. So I'll try again with incognito. If it works, great. If it doesn't work, I'll be extra aggressive. I completely shut down Google Chrome. So I'll try to find my snippet. Here we go, and I'll run it again. You see, now it works. That proves my theory. I changed nothing. It was Chrome's fault. Yeah? Unfortunately, this is getting worse and worse over time. I hope the Google engineers, if they can help me, they do something to solve these problems. Yeah? Because this is pretty fundamental. Here, I clearly know it wasn't my fault. But what happens if you are dealing with a complex algorithm? You may think it's your fault, yeah? It's not. So, this is the most simplistic approach to snippets. We create a function, welcome, and then we invoke it. So obviously that could get a bit more complicated, or way more complicated. So let's say that we can pass the name of a player, and then we can do welcome to JavaScript, comma, Peter, or Lucy, or whoever. Yeah, we want to welcome someone. How do we do that, guys, with JavaScript? Outside plus what?
User. The name of the
User.
And we put an argument maybe
Here. What's the name of the argument? User. Anything else? Pass it here, right? Something like that? What will that display? Will it display welcome to JavaScript? No, why not? Correct. Coding is about paying attention to details. Here we miss the space. Yeah. Now hopefully that will be a bit more readable. So if we execute it again, yeah, now it works. As Chrome suggests, there is a shortcut to run the snippet automatically without having to move the cursor and click on it. If you're a Mac user, the shortcut is Command Enter. If you're a Windows user, the shortcut is Control Enter. If you're a Linux user, I'm sure you know how to do it. It's the same, Control Enter. Brilliant. So with Command Enter, in my case, yeah, it gets executed. Can we solve that problem without using plus? How? Backticks. How we use backticks, guys? Dollar, curly bracket. Backticks. And then what? At the end, here. No. Here. Yes. Yeah. Dollar.
Right, using curly braces.
Curly braces, correct. And then we close the curly braces, right, at the end. Something like that. Correct. Still works. Good point. So obviously now we can invoke the function passing a different argument, right? Then it will be reevaluated every time. Can we have breakpoints here? Look, what happens if I click on line number 3? If I click on line number 3 and I execute this algorithm again, you see? It stops, which is very convenient, because if the algorithm doesn't work as expected, look, it's telling you the value of user. I can hover over as well. Yeah, so it's pretty powerful. Just be careful. Just be careful with something. If you are, and that will happen, it's just a matter of time, but the more you pay attention on the next 25 seconds, the less it will happen. If you are pausing an execution with the green line, never ever run the snippet again. If you do that, Google Chrome will enter in a kind of evil mode, and it will ignore you forever, and it will change the background color, and it will start laughing, you know. Don't do that. So if you are running a snippet, please finish it. Finish it first. How do you finish it? You may have noticed that play button here, right? So finish it here, and then once it's over, then of course you can run it again. Yeah, but finish it first. Cool. Let's see who is the first one that comes to me saying, hey, why this doesn't work, right? Remember this time. I'll show you this minute of the video. Cool.
Get a breakpoint by clicking the number.
Yes, so with a breakpoint, you can remove it by clicking again. Yeah. Actually, this is very powerful, because you can. What happens if you are testing a complex function? You got 20 breakpoints. What happens if you don't really want to remove them? Now you want to run the snippet end to end without any interruption. You can disable. Look at this button. Deactivate breakpoints. It's grayed out now. You see? So if the breakpoint is disabled, then you know it's just ignored. There is a very powerful but underestimated feature in breakpoints, which are conditional breakpoints. What happened? And that will happen. Or that will happen, for instance, happened with the Codery platform. We got 400 players each. We noticed that one of them had issues. So when we render the list of players, for one of them, it saw weird characters and, you know, evil faces and things like that. So obviously, if we had a breakpoint for each player, it will stop 400 times. This is not convenient. Imagine that our algorithm works fine with Kim, but it doesn't work fine with Donald. Very simple example, right? If I add a breakpoint, it stops with Donald, which is okay, but I don't want it. It stops with Kim, which is fine, but it doesn't work fine with Boris, yeah? So I want just to focus on Boris. So you can add a conditional breakpoint. You can say stop here just if the user is Boris. This is very, very powerful. To do that, you do right click add conditional breakpoint. And here, you set the expression. When do you want me to stop here? When when user equal Boris. This is an if, right? If statement. So what that means? Look, now it's orange. It's a new color. Yeah. So if you put Donald, will it stop or not? No. Correct. If I put Kim, will it stop or not? No. And if I put Boris, will it stop or not?
No.
Why not?
It's not applicable.
Correct. Remember, JavaScript is case sensitive. So it won't stop here at all. How then if we change it to capital B, will it stop now? Correct. See? Conditional breakpoints. Is there any question? No? Because we are 53 seconds out of time. Just a final reminder. DevTools make the difference between a good developer and a bad developer. I've been interviewing hundreds and hundreds of people in my life. The first impression you get about a developer you are interviewing is not the dress code, it's not the accent, it's not the haircut. The first impression you get is about the way that person sits and prepares the problem. Yeah? If you are asking a person, this is a website, something is not working, how will you debug the issue? What will you do, right? If the first thing the person does is right-click DevTools, inspect the logs, inspect the network, that's the first impression. It's very positive. That person is doing the right thing. If the person starts looking around, thinking, but never open DevTools, that's bad smell. Yeah, that person doesn't know what he or she is doing. So please, from now on, every time you have a problem, the very first thing is open DevTools. Actually, DevTools should be open at 9 a.m. in the morning. Leave it open all the time. If you come back to me with a problem and DevTools is not open, I'm not going to help. I'm sorry. Because, generally speaking, the problem gets solved by literally open DevTools. Because if there is any issue, the console will throw an error. You created a variable called movie in lowercase, but you are trying to access movie with capital M. Fail. If you read the error, oh, of course, it takes 5 seconds to solve it. If you don't read the error, it may take ages. Yeah? So please, DevTools open at 9 a.m. every single day until you die is a bit aggressive, but at least until you are working as a developer. Anything else? No? Cool. So that was it for this morning. Thank you very much, guys.